There is a specific, visceral tightening in your chest that occurs the moment you see a notification slide down your screen. It is not necessarily fear, and it is certainly not excitement. It is an obligation. I want you to think about the last time you opened your phone settings, specifically the Privacy tab. You know the sequence by heart, don't you? Settings, Account, Privacy, Last Seen, and then the most comforting button of all, Nobody. You have likely found yourself performing a strange digital dance. Perhaps you have turned on airplane mode just to read a message without triggering the blue ticks. Or perhaps you have stared at a blinking cursor, that simple, rhythmic typing animation from someone else, and felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to lock your phone and throw it across the room. You are not alone in this. There is a silent majority of you who treat your online status not as a feature, but as a threat. You tell yourself you are just busy. You tell yourself you are simply preserving your battery life. But let us be honest with one another for a moment. This is not about battery. This is about availability. The moment that green dot appears next to your name, you are no longer a private entity. You are perceived. You are suddenly open for business in a marketplace of attention that you never agreed to join. You feel that if you acknowledge a message, you have started a timer. A countdown has begun where you are now socially contracted to perform, to be witty, to be empathetic, to be present. And quite frankly, you are exhausted. This habit of yours, the ghosting, the hiding, the lurking, it is not because you hate people. In fact, you likely feel things more deeply than most. It is precisely because you care so much that the sheer weight of being accessible feels like a physical, heavy burden. Modern psychology might call this social anxiety or avoidance coping. But those are clinical terms for a philosophical problem. What you are experiencing is the existential dread of the digital Panopticon. You are trying to reclaim the only thing the internet has stolen from you, your right to exist without an audience. You are not antisocial. You are simply a guardian of your own solitude. To understand why you hide, we must first look at what you are hiding from. We live in an era that has weaponized availability. The modern world operates on a tyrannical assumption that if you are awake and if you are holding a device, you are public property. Society tells you that seen requires a response. It tells you that silence is an insult. If you take 3 hours to reply to a text, you are labeled distant. If you turn off your read receipts, you are labeled suspicious. If you do not post stories about your lunch, your vacation, or your deepest traumas, you are labeled boring. But I know the truth about you. You are not boring, and you are certainly not suspicious. You are simply exhausted by the performance. I know that when you see a message notification, you do not feel annoyance toward the sender. You feel a sudden, crushing wave of guilt. You think, if I open this, I have to be the version of myself they expect. The funny friend, the reliable employee, the supportive listener. You hide your status not to deceive them, but to buy yourself a moment of freedom from having to be someone. Let us reframe this immediately. Your behavior is not a social deficit, it is a protective mechanism. In a world of noise, you have chosen to be a sanctuary of silence. This is what we might call digital asceticism. Just as monks once retreated to the mountains to preserve their spiritual purity, you retreat to the invisible mode to preserve your mental sanctity. You are not lurking in the shadows, you are standing guard at the gates of your own mind. The extroverted world sees your silence as emptiness. They are wrong. Your silence is dense. It is heavy with thought, with observation, with internal dialogue that you are not willing to cheapen by broadcasting it for cheap likes. Think about the people who are constantly online. The green dot is always active. They reply instantly. Are they truly connected, or are they terrified of being alone with their own thoughts? You, on the other hand, are comfortable in the void. You possess a rare ability to sit with yourself. By hiding your status, you are reclaiming the autonomy of your time. You are declaring that your attention is a finite resource, not a buffet for the public to feast upon. So, let us discard the shame. You do not owe the world immediate access to your consciousness. Your delay is not a crime, it is a boundary. And in a world that demands you be everywhere at once, choosing to be nowhere is the ultimate act of rebellion. Now, we must peel back the surface layers of psychology and stare into the abyss of the mechanism itself. Why does being perceived feel like a violation? To answer this, we must look beyond the screen and into the nature of existence itself. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre proposed a concept known as the look, or le regard. He argued that when you are alone, you are a subject. You are the center of your own universe, free to act and define reality. But the moment another person sees you, everything changes. Under the gaze of another, you are instantly demoted. You cease to be a subject and you become an object in their world. You are no longer the one seeing, you are the thing being seen. This is the hidden variable causing your anxiety. The internet acts as a permanent, omnipresent look. When your status turns green, when those read receipts tick blue, you are being objectified by hundreds of people simultaneously. You are trapped in what Foucault called the Panopticon, a prison where the prisoner knows they might be watched at any moment and thus must constantly police their own behavior. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Let us consult Carl Jung and the concept of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to interact with society. It is the smiling face, the polite employee, the witty commenter. It is necessary, but it is heavy. It requires immense psychic energy to maintain. For the introvert or the lurker, the tragedy of the digital age is that the mask is never allowed to come off. In the physical world, when you close your front door, the persona drops. You can just be. But online, the door never closes. The expectation of a reply keeps the mask glued to your face, suffocating the true self underneath. This brings us to the alchemy of your suffering. You are not hiding because you are weak. You are entering a phase the alchemists called nigredo, the blackening. In alchemy, nigredo is the first step of the great work. It is the stage of decomposition, of rotting, of darkness. It is where all false structures are broken down so that something new can be born. It is a necessary collapse. Your desire to be invisible, to turn off your status, to ghost the world. This is your soul demanding a negredo. You are instinctively trying to return to the darkness, to the chaos, to the unformed state where you do not have to be anything. The Stoics taught us that we must distinguish between what is in our control and what is not. You cannot control how others perceive you. If you are online, they will project their own needs, their own insecurities, and their own narratives onto you. They will invent a version of you that does not exist. By hiding your status, you are reclaiming the only control you have. You are removing the variable. You are refusing to be a screen upon which they project their movies. Society calls this isolation. I call it incubation. Society calls this antisocial. I call it preservation. You are protecting the sanctity of your inner world from the pollution of the outer gaze. You are keeping the hidden variable of your true self safe from the algorithm that wants to flatten you into a data point. So, when you feel that guilt for not replying, remember this. You are not neglecting them. You are prioritizing the survival of your own consciousness. You are refusing to be an object. You are insisting, quietly and firmly, on remaining a subject. The darkness is not empty. It is where the real work happens. And so we arrive at the end. But perhaps for you, this is a beginning. This channel is not designed to be a public square filled with noise. It is designed to be a sanctuary. A quiet room at the end of the digital hallway where you can rest without being watched. I want to ask you something, and I invite you to answer in the comments below. Not for the algorithm, but for the others who are reading this and feeling the same isolation. When was the last time you felt the overwhelming need to vanish? Was it a specific message, a specific person, or simply the weight of the world? If you do not have the words, or if speaking feels too heavy right now, simply leave a single period. Let that dot represent your presence here, silent, observed, but safe. You are not alone in the shadows. We are all hiding here together. I am merely a student of the human condition, just like you. Until next time.